I am Rich.
And on this podcast, we will be discussing the Weird War Tales comic book series published by DC Comics from 1971 to 1983. And on this episode in particular, folks, we're taking a look at Weird War Tales number 67. But first, Rich has some retroactive history for you.
All the way back in episode 0, Max made a comment that, against all probability, I had somehow gotten promoted a couple of times in the Army. I was supposed to have gotten bumped to Sergeant First Class E7 back in October, but someone at battalion that was new to their position screwed up what should have been a slam dunk, and my promotion and transfer to a unit in New Jersey was rejected. To their credit, they fully admitted they screwed up, snafu, but their way of fixing it was simply waiting until the next board. Oh, ho, 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 was I hot. Glad I didn't announce this on the show before I was actually promoted. My dad didn't live to see it. Promotion took effect April 1st, and a transfer to a unit near Boston came with it. That probably means your co-hosts might cross paths more often. Stay tuned, Joes. A new adventure awaits. I got promoted to the 104th Division as a buck sergeant, E5, 10 years ago, so the transfer was overdue. And in gratitude for my decade of faithful service, I was awarded an Army Commendation Medal, my second one overall. Must have impressed someone. Intel report. Remember that World War I Doctor Who story I did an intel report on last episode? While reading that one, I discovered an ad for this one. Kronos Commandos, Dawn Patrol, a 5-issue miniseries by Titan Comics from August to December 2013 that I bought as a collected hardcover. Created by Stuart Jennett. When the Allies and Nazis developed time-diving technology that could see the course of the Second World War derailed by creatures from the Cretaceous, only the Sarge and his band of misfit soldiers can save the future by saving history. Dinosaurs, giant crocodiles, towering spiders, Albert Einstein with a machine gun. Its Sound of Thunder meets Inglorious Bastards. The title looked like it was meant to continue, but I've been unable to find any evidence it actually did. You would totally enjoy this one, Captain Evilheart.
Yeah, you got all my ears perked up by the end of that description.
Cover detail. Art by Joe Kubert. 50 cents. Bigger comic equals price hike. Weird War Tales is orange on white on a blue background. All new. A red-headed woman weeps over the body of a blonde GI. Behind her, a Nazi vampire transforms into a massive vampire bat. Banners galore. Above the title, now, more thrills than ever before. On the left, beware, the attack of the undead. On the right, plus, The Alien Among Us by Mike Grell and The Lost Ace by Howard Chaykin. Spoilers, guys. Cover date, September 1978. Date of release, June 13th, 1978. Old Comics Man. Seen on eBay for anywhere between $4 and $50. No killjoy. Max, what do you got to say?
All right, kicking off comments and commendations for this issue's cover. I'll say, I know I'm usually the one who champions the more unrealistic or mood-driven coloring choices in comic books, but I kind of think that's the one weakness, or one of the few, as Rich will rightfully point out, of this cover for me. I mean, it seems our grieving gal up front might notice the blindingly bright flash of neon vampire transformation going on directly behind her, huh? That aside, this cover wins in just about every other department, in my opinion. It represents the theme of the series clearly and interestingly, and the drawing and storytelling are just as on point as you'd expect from Joe Mother Bleepin' Kubert. Overall, I say it's a winner that does its job and would certainly have gotten this issue into my hands if I'd seen it on the racks first, but we'll address that topic a little more directly in our next episode, folks.
Typical Kubert greatness. The two banners frame the scene. The woman in the blue dress and purple floral cloak is probably French, since the GI has all of his battle gear. Blue and white Nazi looks like a ghost with light rays shining through him as he morphs halfway, then fully, into the huge magenta and purple bat. The first time I saw the cover, I was a bit confused as to whether the vampire was changing into a bat or vice versa. The scene is great, but like I said, there's a bit of confusion and all the banners make the cover cluttered. I know we're all excited because we're getting a bigger and better comic book, but I don't know if this was the way to do it. Got to put this cover in the stack. So moving on. Max's favorite part of the show, the introduction. Script by Paul Levitz, art by Romeo Tanghal. A different type of intro page. It's actually kind of an anthology scene. Death is in a GI uniform, holding a scythe and crouching on a pile of skulls. Across the bottom of the page, we see a robot that looks not at all unintentionally for 1978 like R2-D2, firing twin lasers from his arms into one of 3 attacking tanks. In the upper left corner, a kneeling GI on a pentagram greets a blue-skinned horned demon appearing in a cloud of smoke. In the upper right corner, a squad of GIs sit in a foxhole under a full moon. One of them is firing a Thompson at a lunging vampire in a Nazi uniform as 4 more huge bats close in. We have a pink explosion text panel. Now, more pages, more stories, more all-new thrills. A weird War Tales banner on the top of the page. Death says,
Across the ages, only one thing is ever present. The unexplained. There are always events beyond human understanding, and many of them in the midst of mankind's greatest struggles. Enter my domain, reader, and fear, for I am Death, the warrior who wins the ultimate battle. And these are my conquests. You have the privilege of sharing them, if you dare.
No, Killjoy. I'll lead up the CNC. The vampire scene is a nod to both the cover and the first story in the book. I like how Tanghal represents death in a tight crouch on the skull mound, with the uncut 16-inch pre-war bayonet on his hip. But the overall page is a crowded mess. There's too much going on. The demon looks like an ape with horns and pointed ears. Just like the cover, there are elements I like, but overall, got to put this one in the stack also.
Yeah, this is a rough one for me, as it does have all the ingredients in place for a killer intro page, but it's in the execution where it all kind of goes awry. Again, the coloring choices do this page no favors, as the look is just generally too bright and cheery, an effect that is compounded by the aforementioned sparkly starburst of more pages. That blurb there just stands out in a bad way. Did we not put enough of that all over the cover of this issue? I echo Rich's approval of the host himself crouched atop his pile of skulls. I mean, assignment understood right there. And I would be remiss if I didn't give an even further shout out to the R2-D2 with cannon arms that's just given absolute hell to the tanks aligned against him in the lower left corner. Don't serve our kind here, eh? These droids have had it with your organics only countersigns, buddy.
Story 1, The Attack of the Undead. 7 pages. Script by Jack C. Harris. Art by, drumroll please, E.R. Cruz. Synopsis. 1944. The last bitter efforts of the Third Reich to hold on to France are doomed to failure. Henrik von Schmidt loves the Reich because of the hidden talents he was allowed to show. The hideous scar across his nose and cheekbones is a souvenir from using those talents. Under a full moon, Schmidt leads a squad of men in search of Allied forces. Forward, Schwein! The Allied fools will not get closer to Paris. We will crush them first. One of his men protests. Herr Schmidt, we are low on supplies. We must turn back to camp. Was? You show weakness, comrade. Such is not the way of a true German. I should... Schmidt is interrupted by a cry of discovery. An Allied encampment was being established before them. Schmidt prepares his men for an attack, but his men are aghast. We are only 5. There must be 200 troops in the encampment. We must report our sighting to the commandant. These were his orders. But Schmidt won't have it. Glory for the fatherland is what he seeks, and he grabs the soldier that challenges him. My orders, Schwein, are the same as yours. Fight and die for your Führer if necessary. You will obey me when I am. A burst of fire from the Allied camp makes the 5 Germans hit the ground. They were discovered, but time passes and no enemy soldiers appear. They had been firing blind. The Germans silently climb to their feet and disappear into the darkness. They could make it back to camp before daybreak, but Schmidt wants to stay in the area. A nearby hilltop cottage will serve as their base. A light in an upstairs window shows that the cottage is occupied, but Schmidt doesn't care. Germany had conquered France. They will take what they need. He kicks the door open and orders Klaus to go upstairs and drag whoever is there down. But a beautiful blonde-haired woman in a white dress is always descending the stairs towards them. There is no need to drag anyone. I am called Yvette, and my house is open to you. Schmidt grabs her by the arms and looks her up and down. Yes, we will stay here. There is no one else. The house is empty, save for my men and me and you. Yes, she stammers. Search the house. I will question the Fräulein. As the men scatter, Schmidt takes Yvette in his arms. First question. How long has it been since your lips have touched those of a real man? Too long, she replies, nuzzling up to his neck. Too long. And a vampire thirsts. Her fangs sink into Schmidt's neck and he screams as she drains his blood. Wings burst from her dress and she swoops over the 2 closest Germans and drinks her fill. By the time the sun rises, an unholy thirst is quenched, and 5 who lived, live no more. 3 days and nights pass, and the Germans transform into the undead. We have returned, Schmidt exclaims. Now we have the power of the vampire to destroy the enemies of the fatherland. Yvette had departed, and Schmidt recognizes their good fortune. When a vampire changes a human, that human is compelled to obey that vampire. And now we shall change the entire company of allies into vampires. In 3 nights, we shall have an invincible company of the undead loyal to us and the fatherland. They transform into massive vampire bats and take off into the evening sky. They descend on the camp and swoop into the largest tent. Now! Yells one of the Americans. Spotlights are turned on, and Schmidt is horrified to see a large golden cross standing at the far end of the tent. No! It's a chapel! A house of God! Ah! The 5 bats flop to the ground and change back to their human forms as the Americans attack. These wooden tent stakes have more than one use, Hellspawn! The Germans scream as the stakes are driven into their chests. Later, a purifying fire disposes of the unholy remains of the enemy, and a sergeant and a chaplain talk in front of it. How did you know we'd be attacked by vampires, chaplain? An informant, a young girl whose loyalty to her country is awe-inspiring. Although I could do nothing to save her soul, I could help her to aid her country, the one thing she was still able to love. Behind the chaplain, a massive grinning vampire bat flies in front of a full moon. Killjoy! Chaplain is misspelled. And apparently the full moon lasted for 3 nights. Max, take it away, sir.
Hey, it's pretty weird if the full moon lasts for 3 nights, right? So that fits. So, all right, C&C on our opening story here. Gotta say, after a couple of more or less minor wobbles, this issue gets its feet back under it in a big way with this opening story. As Rich is going to mention, the first page is just a masterclass on how to open a Weird War Tales story. The helmeted host dialogue is a bit limp, but the rest of the page is so good that it hardly matters. I do feel that the coloring, here I go again, could have been switched up a bit over the course of the first 3 pages. I know it's all the same scene at the same time at night, with the same figures, but that's my point. Sticking to simply reflect the reality of the scene in every panel with the coloring is visually boring in this case, and starts inviting your eyes to skim over all the sameness on display. That all changes almost immediately with page 4, as some of the backgrounds take on more mood-appropriate and visually interesting hues, and some other environmental details break up the skipping record effect of the first few pages. That's no knock on the actual drawings or storytelling on display in the first 3 pages, or any of those that follow, however. This, as Rich will mention, is E.R. Cruz, folks. And if he wasn't a long-running and well-respected instructor at the Kubert School, then that would be their loss, as Mr. Cruz just knows his job. Changes in focus, perspective, page layouts, even the shapes of the panels are used to masterful effect throughout this story. But my main call out to illustrate this point, check out page 5, panel 6, a ragged and violently tilted panel with clearly depicted bodies in the foreground while gruesome and savage action goes ripping toward the far side of things in silhouette. Okay, now for the story. I dug it, and I actually liked how the Allied soldiers took the chaplain's warning at face value. It makes me think that this story is taking place in the world of the series itself, and that some troops are starting to catch on that there is some weirdness afoot out there in this war that's going on. You know, and the very end also reminds me of the oft-used trope of not even the bad guys wanting to be associated with actual Nazis, since the vampire tipped them off, the vet tipped them off. See Magneto and the Joker's take on the Red Skull in various Marvel and DC Marvel published comics, people. So I like that little trope being there too. Like Yvette might be a vampire, but she don't want a bunch of Nazi vampires taking over her country.
If the vampire was such a good soldier of France, why did she just kill the Germans outright and save the Americans the hassle? Oh, right. Dramatic ending for the story. Okay. E.R. Cruz? No. E.R. freaking Cruz. I've said the man is steadily climbing the ladder of my favorite artists before, and he still is. Page 1, just all of it. Death is a skeletal ghost in German uniform gesturing towards the German patrol with his MP40 in the splash panel. The two panels under it are jagged in shape as we meet the scarred Schmidt with a panel-breaking bat flying over his head. Page 3, panel 3 of the Germans taking cover in the grass is solid. Page 4, panels 1 and 2 frame the dynamic action of Schmidt kicking the door into the cottage. Ah, Schmidt, you were thinking with your little head instead of your big head. And this is what happens. Agree, Sir Max. Page 5, panel 6, the silhouette of winged Yvette attacking the last German with the other 4 dead on the cottage floor. And the last panel of the story with our deathly German narrator and smiling vampire bat in front of a full moon. Real nice. I do have to wonder how that brief from the chaplain to the troops was initially received, though. Padre says we're going to be getting attacked by German vampires tonight. You distract him, and I'll get the Section 8 paperwork and a rubber truck ready. Great opening story.
Yeah, I'll say that unlike Batman in a lot of DC comics, where he literally teams up with the Spectre and Zatanna and Dr. Fate, but then in other stories, he'll be like, I don't believe in any of this magic hocus pocus. The soldiers here in this Weird War Tale story seem capable of learning and having a long-term memory. They're like vampires, right? I know somebody that happened to last week. Let's get ready. So I dug that part because I just imagined an extended Weird War Tales universe being built. So anyway, my delusions aside, we're going to hop into the second story of this issue, and it is called The Lost Ace. 6 pages long. Script is by only timer Mark Manhart, and art is by favorite of the show sometimes, Howard Chaykin. Synopsis for this little tale goes a little something like this. Like swarms of angry wasps, Japanese Zeros scream down from behind camouflaging clouds into the midst of an American Flying Tiger squadron. Rookie pilot Jenkins can't shake the Zero that drops onto his tail, but Squadron Commander Marshall swoops in and blows the enemy fighter apart with a burst of fire. Too close to the blast, Marshall's engine begins to smoke from a piece of shrapnel. At the same time, the enemy's squadron's commander is recognized, Saburo, Japan's #1 ace. The mere mention of the name would ordinarily evoke sheer hatred in all but the most unfeeling pilot. But there is no time for such feelings. The enemy ace jumps on another rookie pilot, Smith, and gives the P-40 a long burst. Helpless in his crippled bird, Marshall calls for Smith to bail out, but the canopy remains closed as Smith rides his burning Warhawk into the craggy cliffs below. A second P-40 goes down under the ace's guns, and Marshall curses. His young pilots have no chance against that Japanese devil. He radios to his wingman. Deputy, recall what's left of the squadron. We're going home. Deputy doesn't like the order, but he obeys. Back at the base, the surviving pilots grumble about their commander. Some hotshot leader we have. If he's such a great ace, why didn't he take on Saburo? He said his engine was shot up. Says who? I didn't see no smoke. Meanwhile, Marshall is arguing with his commander. Captain, you just can't send up our boys again without more training. They're still babes in the woods compared to Saburo's outfit. Someone's got to protect our ships from his continued raids, and we're the only squadron in the area. I know our casualties are increasing, but I can't get any experienced pilots for replacements. An explosion outside draws everyone to the windows. Hey, come over here to the window. It's Saburo doing a solo strafing run down the row of parked P-40s. And he taunts the Americans over the radio. Yankee imperialist cowards, you run from me in battle, so I follow. I challenge your leader to fight me if he is man enough. Marshall immediately accepts the challenge, but Deputy isn't sure if he should. I've been waiting for a crack at that creep for a long time. I would have taken him on this morning, but my engine was shot up. Captain agrees. Marshall was an ace himself with 6 kills. If anyone could take on Saburo, Marshall could. Further, Marshall rejects Deputy's request to fly as his wingman for this sortie. The only wingman Marshall will need is an angel. The American takes off alone, and the remaining pilots settle around a radio to wait. Hours pass. Finally, a report comes in from the aircraft carrier Enterprise, which had witnessed the battle. Marshall had rammed Saburo head on, and they had both gone down. But Saburo had been picked up by a Jap destroyer. There was no sign of Marshall. Dejected, Deputy wanders into the night. If only they had flown as a team, it might have been different. But then, Deputy realizes that if Saburo had been picked up, he was probably already back flying patrols. Deputy climbs into his P-40 and takes off into the moonlit sky to search for the enemy pilot. Flying out over the water, the young pilot radios the Enterprise, wanting an update on the search for Marshall. None. Saburo suddenly pounces on the young American, diving out of the full moon, take a drink, guns blazing. Deputy's desperate attempts to shake off the legendary samurai are useless, and soon his Warhawk is a sieve, on fire and diving for the sea. Pulling out scant feet above the water, Deputy is amazed to see a ghostly white P-40 burst from the ocean right in front of him and climb straight for Saburo's Zero. It was Marshall, flying a ghost plane. Saburo also sees the spectral Warhawk streaking for him and opens fire, but his bullets have no effect. Once again, Marshall rams Saburo head on, and the Zero's gas tanks explode. There will be no escape for the Japanese ace this time. As Deputy limps home, he realizes that Marshall had come back from the grave to protect his wingman.
Killjoy was here. History Minute. The top-scoring Japanese ace of World War II was Hiroyoshi Nishizawa, officially credited with 87 kills. By comparison, the top U.S. ace, Richard Bong, shot down 40. The Devil of Rabaul was 24 years old when he was shot down as a helpless passenger aboard a twin-engine Helen bomber that was being used as a transport. Keeping in line with this story, Saburo Sakai, the Sky Samurai, who died in 2000, was officially credited with 28 kills, though he claimed close to 60. He fought with honor and had once spared a civilian transport that would have been an easy victory. The P-40 couldn't dogfight with the nimble Zero, although it was a lot more rugged. Slashing attacks through enemy formations were best bets, and if the pilot got in trouble, he'd simply dive away. Page 6, panel 6, for example, Deputy and the Enterprise exchanged info via radio. Enterprise almost certainly would have had a code call sign rather than just be identified by his real name. But more importantly, the Big E wouldn't have been in that Western Pacific in 1942. The Japanese would have sent her to the bottom in 6 seconds flat. Our carriers wouldn't be in that area until late 44 at the earliest. As it was, the Japanese claimed to have sunk her 3 times over the course of the war when they hadn't, which spawned one of these ships' nicknames, the Gray Ghost. Sidebar, as I've said before, my great uncle, Ensign Joseph Jewell, flew TBM Avengers off the Enterprise for 2 cruises late in the war and earned a Purple Heart when a kamikaze hit the ship and knocked her out of the war. Page 5, panel 5. Deputy's going into the drink. He's not pulling out of that dive so close to the water. And I doubt Saburo would be flying a combat mission the same day he was shot down and picked up. Even if he was uninjured, his doctors would probably insist he take a couple of days off. C&C. I slag on Chaikin a lot, traditionally, but I will give him a nod on page 3, panel 2, with Marshall's blood chit on the back of his flight jacket. I talked about those a bit in issue 55. Jenkins on page 1, panel 2 looks like a novice pilot, which is good, but the zero on his tail looks like slapped out crap. Page 5, panel 2, Deputy's P-40 trying to escape Saburo, flying along the moonlight, reflecting in the water, I like. Chaikin does another crap job drawing the Chinese insignia on the P-40s. And actually on the P-40s themselves, all the instances of the insignia on page 6, panel 1, for example, look like RF roundels. Check the album for what they really look like. Panels 3 and 4 on page 6 of the ghostly Marshall and his P-40 are pretty good. For a one and done, Ryder Manhart does a pretty good job, with the exceptions of the few examples I provided. It seems Chaikin told Manhart, "Don't come back!" We gave him his due for the sci-fi issue a couple months ago, but his effort since has been wanting. This sucks. This is going to be the dead of the issue, and we still have one story to go.
All right, well, if the Howard Chaikin fan club doesn't already hate us by now, then what are they waiting for? We work hard here on the Weird Warriors podcast. Use your hatred. Anyway, the art isn't all bad by any means in this story, in my opinion, but don't let that stop you. Although it doesn't get off on the right foot with me at all, leading with that heavily inked into near abstraction sorry excused for a host. That aside, the opening page, I think, is really well done and dramatic, as it had better be, given another Howard Chaikin factoid that I'm going to bring up later in the episode. Ooh, teaser. But seriously, I look at that first page and I'm pretty much in. Page 2 is pretty good as well, with plenty of perspective changes to keep things interesting, and it all even manages to survive the slight overcrowding of text. On page 3, though, the overbearing text invasion gains ground, and Chaikin's otherwise skillful work, see how nice I'm being, is all but lost to it. Pages 4 and 5 recover very nicely from all that, with varied and interesting panel work and scene choices allowed to speak much more freely for themselves and draw the reader in. I especially liked the moody work on page 4, panel 5, with the darkly silhouetted palm trees behind Deputy as he plans his revenge. It's really cool. I like that panel a lot, and it's not a big deal panel, but it's visually just struck me. I had to call it out. It's a bit undercut by the panel directly above it, narratively speaking, as the whole showdown between Marshall and Saburo is narrated to us off panel over the radio. I was not a fan of that. And even though the art is once again pretty good, see, the ending on page 6 just feels flat to me. Marshall, who we didn't even get to see die, comes back as a ghost and takes out Saburo just because? Even for Weird War Tales, this was a weak way to cram in the "and a ghost" part of the story for me. I did feel that this was a pretty good showcase for Chaikin's artistic chops. I don't have the eye for detail that Rich does, so I was able to enjoy things. I just wish he'd had a better script to work with. As for the script, I think I found Mark Manhart's Find a Grave page. Who am I? And if this is the right guy, he would have been 23 years old when the story was published. So I'll cut him some slack. After all, he passed away in 2007 at age 52 of heart disease. So, maybe I'm just tired of feeling like a jerk all the time, huh? And Rich confirmed, I did actually find his Find a Grave page. I was curious if this was a pseudonym or what. So I did some research, people, and I went into a website that normally is only reserved for one half of this show. So there you go. That's story number 2. What do we got up next?
The Alien Among Us. 11 pages. Script by Jack Olick. Art by another only timer. Vietnam War Air Force veteran Mike Grell. Have you ever wondered what lies out in space? How do we know the yarn the farmers of Millvale, Maine tell of alien monsters isn't true, even though the authorities had to hush it up? We don't know. Bridget does, but she'll never tell. Night. A small alien spacecraft lands, and a red reptilian humanoid in a blue bodysuit gets out, grasping a ray gun. The monster makes its way to the farm of Walt Donald, who recoils in horror at the sight. "Who are you? What do you want?" he asks. "Only your world, Mr. Donald," is the reply, before killing the human with a blast from his weapon. The alien was from Venus, a scout, an observer come to see if Earth can be colonized by his race. Donald's farm should make an ideal base of operations. Dragging the body indoors, the alien transforms and becomes a perfect copy of the deceased Mr. Donald. You humans with your sentiment and your softness. Pah! My task should be easy. No sooner has he finished burying the body in the barn out back when the doorbell rings. It's a red-haired woman dressed in green and wearing a straw cap. She holds an umbrella and several small bags rest on the porch at her feet. Yes? Yes? And is that all you have to say to me, Walt Donald? Me who's come all the way from the old sod just to be your bride? 'Tis Bridget O'Halloran you're talking to. She that answered your advertisement for a wife and all your letters as well. Advertisement? Letters? I don't. Bridget pulls a packet of letters from her handbag. These letters! Faith and I should have known, you men. A girl of character you wanted, a hard worker, this and that you wanted, and now you pretend you don't remember. But you'll not be rid of me that easily, Walt Donald. She holds her umbrella menacingly. A wedding I came for, and a wedding I'll have. You'll not be changing your mind now, I warn you. But I haven't changed my mind. I mean, that is... The alien's mind races. She was a tigress, but his mission came before all else. He pulls her inside and holds her close. Come in. I'm glad to see you. I just wasn't expecting you. You must be tired. You can spend the night, and in the morning we'll talk. Talk! And what do you think you'll be doing now? You'll not be kissing me, Mr. Donald. Not yet. Not till the wedding ring is on me finger, all right and proper. And I'll not be spending the night under the same roof with any single man. She strikes him on the head with her umbrella. A proposal of marriage you sent, and a proposal of marriage I accepted. So we'll go to town right away for the ceremony. The alien wilts under the umbrella pointed directly at him. The ceremony? Yes, all right. Whatever you say. They hop into his jalopy and go into town. If he had to be Walt Donald, he had to do what Walt Donald would have done. The pastor and a couple of Donald's friends happen to be nearby to approve the union. But afterward, the alien recognizes the opportunity. Bridget, I've been thinking. We ought to have a honeymoon. Why don't we go to the city? I mean, if you don't mind. Mind? Why, you darling man, I'd love to go to the city. Whatever you say. It was the cities of men the alien had come to see, not their farms. Bridget marvels at the size of the buildings, but the alien is incensed when a passerby accidentally bumps into him, and he lunges for the man's throat. Animal! You dare touch me? Me? Horrified, Bridget screams for Walt to let him go, but it's too late. The man is dead, his neck broken. Panicked, Bridget grabs his hand and they run together down the street. That should never have happened. Men were no more than insects to the alien, but it was still a mistake. Eventually, they find a boarding house and quickly rent a room to hide in. In the Spartan room, the alien rages at his own stupidity, but he was lucky. He had Bridget. I'm sorry, I lost my head. I know, poor man, it was your temper that did it. You meant no real harm, but if the police should find you, you're not going to tell them? Tell them? Sure, that's a poor thing. You must think of me. We'll have to stay here for a while, quietly, but I'll not give you up. Never. A tower of strength was Bridget, and why not? She had her man and could even be happy. But 4 days passed, and the alien grows frantic at the wasted time. He had to get out and do what he came for. At night, he slips down a fire escape and goes into the city to see how men work and play. But it would take weeks to see it all, months. Standing in front of a theater, the alien recoils into the shadows at the recognition of Bridget on the sidewalk. She must have come looking. The alien hurried back to the room and pretended to be asleep when she returned. A pearl among wives was Bridget, a woman who must have wondered, but who still held her tongue. But patience is not the watchword of a Colleen newlywed. The following night, the alien slips out again, again recognizes Bridget on the sidewalk, and again scurries back to the room. But the pretending to be asleep ploy does not work this time as she rips the covers off of him. So, you needn't pretend to be asleep, you small peen! Get up, I say, and tell me where you've been, and I'll tell you that you're a liar, sneaking out on us still on our honeymoon. I want the truth, Walteld. No husband of mine will go wandering nights. I did go out, but only to get some air. Did you now? And do you think me such a fool as to believe that? Liar! 'Tis what I should have expected, marrying a stranger. Liar! It's the truth. Please, Bridget, keep your voice down. You'll wake everyone. Please. The voice came hard to the alien. He'd had enough then, and his fingers itched for Bridget's throat. But he was a clever one. Bridget, I'm sorry. I should have told you. It's this place. Darling, look. Why do we go home? We can be alone. Just the two of us. A man likes to be alone with his bride, to show how much he loves her. Will you come back with me? Back to the farm? And so the two newlyweds returned to the jalopy and returned to Mill Vale, to the waves of the townsfolk. It wasn't love the alien was thinking of. That quiet barn contained one grave already. There was room for two. It would be simple to explain, after, that Bridget hadn't been happy and had left him. He waited 3 days to allay suspicion, then startled her in the bedroom. Walt, I didn't know you were in the house. Was there something you wanted? Something I wanted? Yes, I want your life. This wasn't like the alien. Another time, he would have killed quickly, coldly, without words. But this woman had tormented him, and for that she must pay. The alien transforms back to his natural reptilian state. Bridget backs against the dresser and screams in horror, and the alien savors the moment. This is me as I really am. I come from Venus, but on Venus we are fighting a civil war, East against West. On my side, the East is losing. We need another world in case we do lose. So I was sent here to see if Earth can be taken over. It should have been easy. These humans are soft fools, but you've made it difficult. I chose this place as my headquarters. It was perfect. Then you had to come. You've tormented me, irritated me. You, a human, but no more. In an hour, you'll be buried in the barn beside another stupid human whose place I took. He died quickly, but you won't. You'll die slowly. Bridget's fear suddenly vanishes. Will I? No, I think not. Husband. She reaches into her handbag on the dresser and pulls out a ray gun. It seems we've both been masquerading. Then Bridget, too, transforms into a red reptilian humanoid wearing a green bodysuit. The alien is shocked. You too? You're one of us. I never dreamed. This is perfect. Two of us. Now we can go on with our work. No, I don't think that would be practical. But why? We're both here for the same purpose. Exactly. That's why I chose this place too. But there's one problem. We aren't the same. We both come from Venus. Only I happen to come from the West. Bridget fires her weapon, killing Walt. Slinging the body over her shoulder, she transforms back into Bridget. You are right, husband. These humans are stupid, soft. It should be easy to take over the world. But you'll have plenty of time to think about that after I bury you where you meant to bury me. The irony of it all. It was almost funny. She was smiling when she walked out to the barn. The smile remained frozen to her face when the lights went on, and the stupid humans shouted their greetings. Surprise! Welcome home! You never had a wedding party, so we thought we'd give you one. The cheers faded away at the sight of the spectacle before them, and Bridget's smile faded as well. She was taken away soon afterwards, but she never told the real story. Who would believe it? Do you? No Killjoy? Max, take it away.
All right, CNC for our closing story. Okay, folks, know this. The Warlord, a DC Comics series pretty much driven and created by the singular vision of this story's artist, Mr. Iron Mike Grell, is an all-time absolute favorite of mine. Also, one of my prized possessions is a sketch of Travis Morgan, the titular Warlord of that series, that Mr. Grell drew for me at a convention several years ago. Picture in the album if I remember to send it to Rich. Now, I'm not a completely non-judgmental fanboy for Grell's work, as I tend to find his early efforts in my also beloved Legion of Superheroes series to be kind of awkward and ugly, really. But hey, he was younger then, and he was around that age when he worked on this story too. But he turns in a generally more polished effort on these pages than he did in the Legion, in my opinion. And in case my impending praise sounds too faint, let it be known that Iron Mike delivers an absolute banger of an opening page with a fantastic host and logo, along with all the other elements that Rich will cover in a minute. I will simply call special attention to the tree that bridges across the first two panels up top. It's embodied by a nicely loose and nearly abstract bit of expressionist inking that stands out from Grell's usual tendency towards his solid and tactile renderings, and it just really caught my eye. Grell's storytelling and drawing is pretty impressive throughout this tale, and Rich covers a lot of that pretty well, so I'll be the nitpicker. Several of Grell's then amateurish ticks that bothered me in his Legion of Superheroes work are on display here, with a generally fumbled grasp on the concept of foreshortening, to be seen on page 4, panel 3, Bridget's umbrella and the weird bump on Walt's nose. Page 5, panel 2, Walt's lunging attack, which just missed the Ditko-ish sweet spot he might have been aiming for. And page 7, panel 1, Bridget's ridiculously rendered pointing hand. There's also a smattering of too large heads and pasted on looking limbs here and there too. But again, this is early work and most of it is really good. The final page, for example, is almost as good as the opener. I mean, the surprise party ending, it made me laugh out loud when I read it and when Rich read it in the synopsis. It's a fantastic ending, people. It's a just much funnier one that you get in Weird War Tales, and it works, right? But as for the pages between those two, the story just really drags for me. And I was a bit confused about the idea of essentially mail order brides going to Maine at this time. But what time was it? Both the script and the art really failed to convey the exact era the story was taking place in. Aside from Walt's model of automobile and Bridget's awesomely ridiculous outfit, I mean, no shade on Bridget at all. Bridget is a 5-star character all around, in my opinion. But the visuals could have been read as a comic or as coming from the 1970s based on all the other visuals. So, I mean, there's a great idea here and some sparks of the genius from Grell that is to come. But overall, it's a mess, and I kind of struggled through it, really. I was surprised by my difficulty with this one.
This has all the feels of a classic Twilight Zone episode, and I've actually been watching a lot of them recently. There is a Millvale, Maine. Based on what Google Maps tells me, it looks like it's the dust mote the story implies it is, near the coast, a few miles south of Bangor. And what is the city? Portland? Boston? New York? Our deathly narrator on the first and last page certainly looks like he's doing hardcore Flash Gordon channeling with that outfit. It's hanging loose because all the skin and muscle has rotted away, which is a great touch. I will say right off the bat that I am sad that this is the only time Mike Grell appears in these pages because he freaking owns it. Start off with page 1, panel 3, the reveal of the emerging alien. Wow. The detail work from the oversized eyes to the wraparound ray gun gets us off to a magnificent start. I could call out a panel a page, and I might. Page 2, panels 1 and 2 of the alien confronting and killing Walt Donald. And I've always been a fan of using cross-hatching for shadowing. The posing and body language is great. Page 3, panels 3 and 4. Bridget arriving on Donald's porch with all her bags, and the look of confusion on his face as she introduces herself. Page 4, panel 2. Bridget giving Walt the old smack on the head of the umbrella. Timeless comedy gold. Page 6, panel 3. A diagonal split of the alien watching men at work and play covers all the angles. Page 7, panel 5, that diabolical look on Donald's face because he asks Bridget to go back to the farm. Murder is on that face. Page 9, panel 1 is a classic horror mag scene of a damsel in distress screaming at the monster before her. Love how she acted all terrified and played him into the unveiling his evil plan before she essentially yawned, pulled out her own ray gun, transformed back to her natural state, and let him have it. Does Venus have their equivalent of Irish lassies? Kind of look like it does. The looking up from the floor perspective on panel 1 of the next page is one you don't see very often. One question I have for old Walt: I assume the warring sides of Venus have their own versions of uniforms. You wearing blue, she's wearing green. Shouldn't that have been a giveaway as to what side she was on? And the last panel of the story, the back view of Bridget walking into a surprise party with an alien corpse on her shoulder with Flash Gordon Death leaning on a pitchfork to one side, wrapping the story. My only art gripe of the story is there. Death's hands look to be a bit too elongated for my liking. And Oleg's style, too, strikes me as having changed a bit with this story. Death narrates throughout, but I caught myself thinking that the aliens are talking to themselves in the third person more than once, the way the narration was worded. The dialogue he crafts for Bridget is borderline funny. A spalpeen is Irish slang for rascal, by the way. This was a delight. The only strike I have is, like Max said, I feel like it just went a page or two too long. One of the city pages could have been dropped easy, and we could have had the same effect.
Yeah, and I got two jokes I forgot to work in here that I just thought of. First of all, men are from East Venus, women are from West Venus. All right. And then old Walt Donald had a farm. E-I. And I'm leaving that in. I'm not going to edit that stuff out, people. I worked hard for that, and I forgot all about it. All right, so Rich is going to take us to the next section of the show quite mercifully, and we're going to take a visit to the APO Weird War Tales letters page.
I'm choosing Sabatini, because Max can't take them all the time. Dear Paul, Kubert's covers are always fascinating, and I would buy a comic with a Kubert cover no matter what was inside. Oops, drat, shouldn't have said that. You wouldn't take advantage of my weakness for Kubert, would you? Well, this issue, 62, I like the insides too. They fit what seems to be rapidly becoming a pattern in the mystery books. One new style story, one old, were done by the older staffers. I suppose it's a pretty satisfying blend. The new story this time, by the Mackenzie Chaikin team, wasn't quite as good as their effort last issue, but it was still a nice piece. Mackenzie seemed to be trying for an EC style story, including, unfortunately, a lot of their schmaltz and cliches. I think the story would have had a lot more impact if the last panel had shown the sewn and buttoned face of Colonel Craigman. But then, that's the kind of stuff that got EC put out of business, so I wouldn't be surprised to learn that you were the code nixed such a scene. The old story was one of the most typical stories you could think of. Frank Rodano did a very nice job in the landscapes, but he showed his lack of real narrative technique. George Cashtan's experiment with time paradoxes was almost funny. It made no sense, but I didn't really mind. It was a cute little story. Would you please get rid of those introductory pages? And Paul responded, we always try to take advantage of everyone's weakness for art, Beppe, as this issue's compendium of Kubert, Cruz, Chaikin, and Grell should nicely demonstrate. It's one of the easiest ways to lure readers into discovering that a magazine is enjoyable. As for your specific comments, we must admit they were unusually perceptive. Ye editor did indeed nix a sewn and buttoned ending, preferring to leave it to the reader's imaginations. And we have been mixing new inventory stories for a one-for-one basis. But now, with our spanking new format and an inventory that's dwindled to half a dozen tales, Weird War will feature almost all material bought under current management, including those introductory pages, which we're rather fond of. However, we'll throw the intro page question open to the readership. If enough readers find them a waste of space, they'll vanish. How about it, fans? PL. And I'm just here to say, just because I'm always a couple issues ahead, looking at scripts and everything. And as of the few issues I've seen so far, they're still in the book. So hopefully this will be an ongoing thing and the intro pages will remain part of the show.
Yeah, I'd even rather some weak intro pages now and then than have them go away entirely. So, I'm all for it. Like even this one that was ultimately weak had some cool elements to it. So, Beppe, Sabatini, maybe you and I, we gotta take a break. So my letter kicks off the letters column here, and it starts off saying, Dear Paul, I purchased Weird War Tales number 62 solely for the Chaykin strip. I am more than satisfied. The story idea was truly weird and fit in with your format perfectly. Mackenzie's script held my interest to the last page. Chaykin's layouts were impressive and exciting, and it was not difficult to empathize with the Colonel in his moment of terror. I don't think you're supposed to empathize with the Nazi, but okay. More Chaykin, please. This comes from Robin Snyder, Box 2143, Bellingham, Washington 98225. Now, I picked this letter really because there were only two others, but because of what's in Paul's response here. And he says there's more of Howie's work in this issue and another short story coming up in number 69. Nice. And we would be remiss in our editorial duty if we'd neglected to mention that he regularly illustrates Enemy Ace for Men of War. But if you want to see his magnum opus, you'll have to keep your eyes on the bookstores for a major SF novel in graphic form, Empire by Samuel R. Delaney and Howard Chaykin, being published in October by Putnam Berkeley in association with Byron Price Visual Publications, Inc. We've seen some of the color proofs and originals, and it's beyond belief. Yeah, Empire, whatever. I want to draw our attention back to the fact that they say Chaykin regularly illustrates Enemy Ace for Men of War. Do you remember that, Rich? Because it didn't seem like you were too happy with Chaykin's plain work in this issue.
Off the top of my head, again, I got so many books that don't really remember off the top of my head, but I do seem to vaguely recall from flipping through those books from when we did that Visiting the Next Five episode that I was not a fan of his Enemy Ace work either. I mean, I could be wrong, but I'm probably not.
Yeah, just it really stood out to me, like, that, oh, wow, Chaykin was an Enemy Ace artist. I had no idea until I read that response. So I thought that was cool. So, all right, that's the letters page, people. We've done the story content. We've done the feedback. You know what time it is now. It's time for our spotlighted ads for this issue, and I'll kick it off. Now, I got to admit, for me, this issue was kind of a wasteland for ads. But I did want to point out the Alligator Eggs mini ad that appears just after page 8 of Alien Among Us. If only for, one, the fact that Florida does seem to be the right place to source such things, and two, just how adorably embarrassed the cartoon gator looks to be appearing in the ad. It's Alligator Eggs, $2 each. K. Gallagher, P.O. Box 95. Is that I can't read the name of that town. Muskin, Florida, 33570. And yeah, the drawing of the alligator is very amateurish, and he's given the side eye like, my mom made me be in this ad, or I needed the money, or something like that. Like, don't ask where the eggs come from kind of thing. I thought that was outsizedly charming for one of these mini ads. Now, for my real ad pick, we go to a favorite retreat of mine for this part of the show, the DC Direct Currents page. Behold the solicitations for 2 titles that listeners of this podcast might very well enjoy, featuring some creators that you might also find familiar. First up, Battle Classics #1, representing Suicide Mission. A 25-page battle blockbuster starring Sergeant Rock, Mademoiselle Marie, and the Haunted Tank by Bob Conager and Joe Kubert. You may have heard of those guys. And then House of Mystery #260, featuring A Demon Shared by Joe Gill and Noli Penalagan. Right on. Dead Wrong is by T. Casey Brennan, whoever. And Jerry Grandinetti. Go to Hades is by Scott Edelman and Terry Henson. Okay, there you go. But following it up, finishing off that issue, is The Monster of Darkwood Down by Bob Toomey and Abe Ocampo. So a lot of people that readers of this series would be familiar with. So I thought that was pretty cool.
I worked on this script the same day we recorded issue 65, where I mentioned that one of the comics Max talked about in his ad, Our Fighting Forces 180, would be canceled in its very next issue. It turns out it was a casualty of the DC implosion. In keeping with that theme, from the pages of GI Combat, OSS, Spies of War, 25 pages of combat espionage in Showcase 104, on sale June 15th. The Kubert cover shows a man and woman doing a trapeze act under a big top lined with swastika banners, with about a half dozen weapons being aimed at them from the ground by German soldiers. The officer yells to the crowd that unless the identity of a spy they are looking for is revealed, the two performers will be executed. A hidden clown cries, wondering how he can let them sacrifice themselves for him. I have this one, obviously. Issue 104 is the very last issue of the original DC Showcase that ran from March-April 1956, another casualty of the DC implosion. It's an anthology with 3 stories. Conager, Estrada, Drought. Pretty sure Max wouldn't mind flipping through this one.
Hell yeah, that sounds every part of that sounds fantastic, so yeah.
So that brings us to, got any last words? And of course we do. Attack of the Undead gets the gold from this newly promoted and decorated Combat Happy Joe. This wasn't a bad book, but it's got its fair share of issues too. The cover was crowded with banners about what was inside the book. The intro page, likewise, had too much going on. Shaken sucks, and Alien Among Us could have been a couple pages shorter. Easy, although I loved it otherwise. Not a great way to start off with a bigger, price-hiked book. This one is going on the top of the bottom half of the pile.
Hey, it's on the top, so it'll take it. I gotta give the medal to the opening story too. I mean, but hey, it wasn't a fair fight with 2 relatively newbie artists up against ER freaking crews. Still, you gotta go to the war with the army you have, right? I enjoyed the Chaykin material more than the Grell stuff, really, on balance. Even if it did get unfairly buried beneath the text in too many places. And it was still a treat for this Warlord fan to see Iron Mike practice his chops in another somewhat unexpected place. A fun time was had by me. Yeah, the issue's got all kinds of problems, but it's Weird War Tales. It's a quirky title. I expect a few bumps along the way. So I think I had more fun with this one on balance than my esteemed co-host. So that's it. That's the last words. We're getting to the scuttlebutt now, where I mentioned we have an incredibly cool Facebook page run by Rich. So those 2 facts might have something to do with each other, because I'm not running the Facebook page, but it's great. And Rich keeps it interesting, keeps the conversations going, shares a lot of stuff over there. So Weird Warriors Podcast Facebook page, go visit it. And while you're there enjoying yourself, you might want to think about buying some of our merch on redbubble.com, where you can get our really freaking cool logo that was designed and drawn by Bill Walko. That's Walko, people, who has done his own online comic strip called The Hero Business. He does art for Archie. He does art for all kinds of cool projects out there. You can get that logo put on any merch that redbubble.com sells. And if you take a picture of that merch after it arrives at your home and send it to the Facebook page I just mentioned, you can get a Sam Star. And if you don't know what that is, just ask on the Facebook page. People should know by now, and Rich shouldn't have any left, but he does. Anyway, that's my bit for the scuttlebutt, and I'll hand the rest of it over to a somewhat friendlier person.
Oh, that's a low bar. I tried to remember to check some of the podcast provider pages our show pops up on from time to time so I can share any reviews anyone leaves. So I will laughingly admit that I only recently realized the show page has its own comment section, and people have been leaving comments there. Just 2, so don't worry. From April 2024, our very own honorary cast member, Jason Zeller, says, "This is an excellent podcast with 2 great guys covering the supernatural war comic series Weird War Tales. With each episode and issue, you'll get real world history, comic creator backgrounds, story coverage and analysis, highlights of the Comics Letters page, and their favorite ads. I very highly recommend this podcast." And then Doug Jones from February of this year adds, "Good insight and memories of a childhood favorite, also a current favorite." Thanks to you both. And to all that have left reviews, positive ones anyway, you know who you are. And that just leaves one thing, the teaser, which we're actually recording tomorrow. Weird War Tales number 68. Speaking of episode 0, if you have an incredible memory and listened to that episode of the show from all the way back in 2021, you may recall this was the very first issue of WWT Max picked up as a wee waif. That's why we use it for the album cover for episode 0 and the episode guide on the Facebook page. So this is going to be a very special episode of the show for my co-host. In fact, it's his birthday present this year. Lined it up like that on purpose. The real reason you had 2 episodes in May. Kaiju, Private Golem US Army, Day After Doomsday returns and lives up to the title for its creative team. I hope this issue doesn't suck from Midnight Battling Bro. Won't suck for me, because Sergeant Rock makes a cameo. Kind of. What the hell am I talking about? Be here next time.
Oh, yes. Yes, we will be here next time. Yeah, man. We've already done it. Like you said, we're recording it tomorrow. It's going to be a super fun one to talk about, and unusual in meta ways here too, in that I actually remembered back when we did episode 0, like you said, what my first issue of Weird War Tales was. I couldn't tell you that for any other comic except for like ones that I started with issue 1 or something. This cover stuck in my mind that hard, but I won't blow too much in the next episode right here by going on about that. I will say, and I just want to remind people, 2 unusual things that I'm referencing here. I actually remembered the first issue of Weird War Tales I ever picked up, even if I probably didn't remember how old I was at the time. And again, in this issue, people, this episode that we just recorded, I did a Find a Grave search and I found Mark Manhart. Like, it's taken a while, 80-something episodes, but I'm making a little progress, and I'd just like that to be acknowledged, okay? And acknowledged by who? By you, by the listeners to this show. What's this show? This is the Weird Warriors podcast. And who are we? We're the hosts of the Weird Warriors podcast. We're the Battling Bros. We're the Weird Warriors. And on this show, us Weird Warriors take our pledge very seriously. And that pledge is to make war
No more.